Welcome to European Tech Talks, a podcast brought to you by the European Champions Alliance. The ECA's mission is simple: support the growth and success of European tech companies in the global market. On this podcast, top tech experts and entrepreneurs from all over Europe will share their insights and actionable tips on how to thrive in the European tech scene and beyond. You'll also get the latest updates on the global tech industry and understand how they impact Europe. Three dynamic European women host your podcast. Andrea, the founder and soul of the ECA, hosting from Paris, France. Lucie, our marketing and communication junkie, hosting from Karlsruhe, Germany. And myself, Anne-Sophie, the tech and product aficionada, hosting from the Silicon Valley. Join us on this journey as we explore the vibrant European tech ecosystem. You can also connect with our thriving community by becoming a member, by following the ECA on LinkedIn, or simply by subscribing to our newsletter on our website. And now, let's jump right into today's episode.
So hello and welcome to a new episode of ECA Tech Talks, the podcast of the European Champions Alliance, where we talk to entrepreneurs, experts, and people from the ecosystem about European tech and how to grow European champions. So today I'm very, very pleased to welcome one of our esteemed members, Sylvie Matz, who's talking to me from Switzerland. And Sylvie, we have been talking a lot in the past about the challenges of startups and scale-ups in Europe. You are what we call an operating partner, and we will talk about that and what that is and what it means a little bit later on. So you work with different investment funds all over the world. And before we dive into the questions, could you present yourself in a couple of words to us?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I've been an operating partner now for 20 years, both at a private equity firm, as partner of a private equity firm, and most recently, starting 10 years ago, as an independent operating partner, working with a handful of family offices, impact funds, and more buyout mid-market private equity funds. Currently, I'm a senior advisor to Falco Global Partners, based out of Switzerland, and we are operating partners working with the best asset managers around the world to create value at their portfolio company.
So maybe first of all, Sylvie, because I often, that I also have an activity as an operating partner, and very often at one of our members also, Hainov d'Entresangle. And very often people ask me, so what is an operating partner and what do you do? So can you give us your vision of what an operating partner is and what he does or she?
Sure. So an operating partner is a seasoned executive. So either a former CEO or COO or C-level executive or a serial entrepreneur. And what any operator have been doing is they have gained lots of experience in running companies, running P&Ls, and able to really create from scratch some activities or drive international development. So basically, you have people who are experienced, who have done it before, who have had success and failures. And what motivates operating partners is the ability to actually drive change, drive creation at portfolio companies in order for the management to be the hero of their growth path.
And what is, maybe we can define a little bit more what the difference is between operating partner in a fund and an independent operating partner and how it works?
Sure. It's a very important question. And operating partners at a fund will actually be working with portfolio companies, whatever their cycle in the portfolio companies are. And that means that there are times where there's lots of activities and there are times where there are less activities, because for me, the operating partner create the capabilities, the help, and the people and the portfolio companies. But because of the need, what is important for some private equity firms is to actually have in-house the talent that will be probably cheaper than just going to the market on a one-off basis. An independent operating partner will have the possibility to work with very different private equity or portfolio companies. So they gain actually a lot more experience in terms of governance, in terms of sectors, in terms of type of companies. So you basically have a decision of a private equity firm that prefer to have that in-house, and operating partners who wants to actually have quite a lot of possibilities to go from companies and during their time as operating partner.
And so we've been discussing a lot the scale-up journey of companies in Europe and why, let's say, what holds them back to become European champions also. And this is where often operating partners can come in because they can support. So how do you see the need of those companies to work with, because, the teams are often young because we talk about startups or scale-ups. And so there's a lot of things that they do for the first time. You have serial entrepreneurs who have understood the game, who know how it works, and who know also how to, let's say, create a team around themselves to really push the company. But many times it's not the case. At what time is it interesting for a company to work with an operating partner, and how do you, so is it always the fund that gives you the information that says, okay, you have this problem, so we're going to find an operating partner, or can they also go and look for them themselves, basically? So there's not always the connection to the fund. But at what time should an operating partner come in? And then how does it work? Is it like a consultant, or is it more like an advisor?
I think we need to step back and understand that when we come to investment, the capital is commoditized. So you have €1 from one VC is equal €1 from another VC. What actually makes the difference is the relationship and the execution experience. And that's where operating partners come in. And that's really important to understand that the best combination for companies is to have capital, to have experience, and to have relationship. So the company, as a startup or on its way to scale up, they will be faced with challenges and opportunities. Let's say international development, just to give like a concrete example. As you know, it is actually quite complex and quite difficult to understand which market to get in and then how to get in. Whilst you're running your business and you're trying to actually just make sure your base is well covered. So international development is a theme that astute operating partners can give a lot of help. Whether it's the company that actually know that they can get a lot of help, or it is a discussion at the board level and the private equity can actually propose that service. But just to make concrete, I can give you one example of what we do at Falco, and it's not private equity led. It's a company in the education tech market. It is a math platform where kids can actually just train on getting better at math. It serves the German market very well. It's been actually selling to each of the region, each of the land. But the question is, how do you grow internationally? And because we knew the company from its past, the founder and CEO of the company felt we could use actually Falco Global Partners in key markets, Spain and France. And the work that I've done in France with them is to really understand how to get within the market. Do we have to actually partner with startups, or do we want to actually go to some of the publishing houses? All this work I've done actually in the background, just making sure that I very quickly scan the opportunities and then understand which is the publishing companies that can be the better fit in terms of DNA, in terms of their appetite also to get better into innovation. at the same time, Betamax is actually running a big contest with the German government. So all their resources is actually just to win that order that will actually give such a leap in their growth. And I make sure that I'm working on the ground. And when I actually take an hour or two of the CEO is with a very concrete possibilities to actually just get into the partnership line. So it takes time, but for the operating partner on the ground, but it doesn't take any time at at the founders or at the management level of the company, because they know they have someone in the ground. And we're not talking about making lots of market analysis. That is a given, but it is the possibility to, once you understand actually that both parties are mature, then they can meet and they can go very quickly into just working on the pilot and understanding what is the partnership like and how they're going to actually go from the pilot to the concrete solution. So it's really thinking about, your core engine, and then you have actually some batteries around the road, and you can plug in those batteries when they're ready for it. And what I think is important is an operating partner needs to be solution driven, and it needs to be able to actually very quickly decipher the culture of the company, so you understand either to push back on some elements, but most importantly to propose the best solution for the company at this stage. But because you've done it before, you know actually what it takes not to do from the past, but doing it what will be needed the most over the next 1 year or the next 2 years. So you always propose solution here and now, but with a mind of what is needed for the future growth.
What I also appreciate about this relationship is that you have a holistic view also, because as you're working with the fund and also with the investors, you have many people who care about the company and who want the company to grow. So you can really have this partnership between the investor, the operating partner, and the company CEO or whoever is in charge of the project, which I think is really very valuable. So is it something that is already market standard in Europe to have operating partners in funds, or is this, I have the impression it's very standard in the US, in Europe?
It's quite early days in Europe, but let me come back to your point. I think one of the skill sets an operating partner needs to have is to have the ability to speak both at the financial sponsors level as well as the company. And because the best private equity operating partners will have had also some experience with private equity, they have the credibility to create this working alliance, to align actually all interests. And this is something that a consultant, and they are super good consultants out there, but because they haven't been working with funds in terms of, either being in the partnership or being very close to it, it's something that differentiates the operating partners. And that's really, really important, because sometimes you have to have discussion with the private equity or the venture capital just to let them understand what it takes to execute. Sometimes you can ask for time, but also you can go to the management team and say, the best way is to accelerate on this element, and this is how we can work it out for the next things. So that's really a skill set that is very, very important. Being able to craft a working alliance that works both for the financial sponsors and the company. Now, in terms of maturity, what's really interesting is the operating partners started at the end of the 90s last century, with companies that had private equity companies that had actually both the industrial side and the financial side. So Clayton, Jubilee, and Rice, for example, was one of the key pioneers to bringing operating partners. And one of the most famous operating partners was Jack Welch, the former CEO of GE, actually. What happened in the US is that it was just a way to differentiate in the mid-market area. And then came 2008, where suddenly there was the big financial crisis, and the venture capitalists suddenly realized that they had to get much more capacity to build the value creation at the portfolio company. So they, just after 2008, they actually massively added operating partner in the VC compartment, and made it an absolute way to work with startups. And because of the financial, power of the US, suddenly the gel worked really well. In Europe, the role actually started in the mid market a bit more with the UK. I was one of the first operating partners in 2004. We were just like a limited numbers, but thanks to the growth of venture capital markets and funds in Europe, on the continent as well, the role came slowly, but the gap is immense now, because you have about 43,000 operating partners in the US, and in France it's only 1,500. So a lot of room to grow for this role.
And so if now someone, because I know that it happens to you and it also happens to me, that people contact us because they know our role and they say, okay, I want to become an operating partner too, or I'm thinking about becoming an operating partner. What do you tell them? How do you become an operating partner?
It's a great question. And indeed, what's been really interesting is 2004, I got a lot of people coming to me and say, I'd like to be an operating partner. What is it? Can that be my next path? I think the first thing is an operating partner needs to have lots of experience. And that experience can be in corporate, that experience can be also in as an entrepreneur. But I think, the experience matters. The experience of being able to transform or to lead profit and loss, to lead companies is super important. But above that, and for me, that is a real differentiator, is the really the urge to be at the service of the company. And that is not said lightly. You have people who want to be in the driving seat, and some people want actually to be more a co-pilot. And I think the operating partners are more in the co-pilot area. So if you have people who want to be at the service of the portfolio company, being able actually to transfer all the experience, but also to grow the people for their success, that's a good operating partner.
And then, because there's no, like certification or something like that for operating partners yet, do you then very concretely, would you then say, okay, I think I tick all of the boxes that Sylvie talked about, and now I can, do my portfolio and then start contacting funds and just say, hey, it's me, I'm an operating partner, I would like to work with you. Is this how it works?
Well, it works with the ability for someone to actually create its own business. And that is quite a challenge, because, if you come from big corporate, or if you come from successful or less successful startups, you've been actually identified with a title, a status, and the power that goes with it. When you transition to an operating partner independently, you have to create your own business. And that means that you have to be a very good salesperson. You have to be networking a lot. You have to do your prospecting plan, everything, you're saying the company should do. You have to do it on your own. And I think that makes a big cut, because most of the time, the time lag between being known on the market and being able to actually get your first project, it's about 18 months. And people need to realize that this is what it takes to be able to have your first actually project, being able actually to to demonstrate your ability to create value, and to be able to then have that credibility in the market that will drive the second or the third mission. But this is really about those three elements: the experience, the ability to actually make hero of management, and then the ability to generate your own business. Then it's, it is part of your job to understand what's your unique selling proposition in the market and who you want to be accessing, to have conversation. And that's where those 18 months come from, because it takes time.
Yeah, it takes. Yeah, I totally agree that it takes time. So, but in your opinion, we should have more operating partners in Europe, right?
I think so, because we have, when you look at what the prospects in terms of growth, on the macroeconomic level, this is quite mature markets, Europe. So you will have to actually go to other markets to grow. Then when it comes to some of the technology segments, you can really understand that there are hyper growth area and you have lack of talents and resources. And this is one element that I want to stress: is an operating partner will help you in the recruitment phase a lot. Because if you think about, let's take an example in cybersecurity. If you're able to bring as an operating partner a former CISO, for example, what this person will have had is an experience of running a security organization, implementing new products, and really understand when all the pitfalls, all the difficulties to run through that cycle. What's interesting is those people will know who are the best engineers and what are the qualities that are required at the stage of the company. And I think this is an element that is super important, because if you look at cybersecurity, there is a really a big question of talents, because there are not enough actually talents, even though it is getting better. So choosing the right person and being able to keep that person is super important. And that operating partner can really help getting that pool of talent. And because they have been doing works, in other settings, they have their own network that actually the company may not have in the same extent. So it's really complementary. And for me, when you talk about startup scale-ups, you have this ability to be able to understand very quickly what is the best hire and how to keep this best hire.
What I also think is that you see from the outside that they need support, and that because of the fact that in some positions there are people in the company that lack this experience, is that they can be, first of all, great sparring partners also for the people in the company, and then also help them from time to time, also as someone who supports from time to time and gives a really experienced view, because normally the startup cannot afford someone who has 15, 20 or 25 years of experience coming from big corporates. The salaries they just couldn't afford. But to have someone who comes in and brings this expertise, either in terms of a project or in terms of working with the company from time to time and working with the C-levels, I think it's also something that can be very powerful, and that I see a little bit not as much used as I think it should be used, to really listen to someone who has the experience and who can steer you and who can really help you because he has been there before.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. And what I see coming now in the European market is entrepreneurs or leaders brought into, the first, second, or third funding, and they are very much more open to build the talent expertise at every single level. So they're happy to have very experienced board. They're happy to have super experienced management team, super experienced partners around. So I think it is part of also the maturity that comes into the tech area, where you have much more people who knows that bringing all those talents together from board to the floor is really, really, really important. But I think what you trigger, questions or a big challenge as well is depending on the resources of the companies, the operating partners need to be quite flexible when it comes to their remuneration. For me, an operating partner is a doer to actually just make sure that first project help them, the company, to reiterate. And sometimes it is a question about having the operating partner's compensation that is based on this success and less on the fixed cost of what it takes to bring that project to a successful level. So that's also quite important to understand. You won't have that same situation when you talk about, later scale-ups or SMEs or even like bigger companies, because then you are more value-driven when it comes to the capacity to bring more fixed cost. But I think it's important to understand that the ability to have sweat equity as part of the sweat equity or sweat or success, share of value is really important in the area of startup and scale up. So that is another constraint actually on the operating partners who wants to get into that area into the early stage companies.
So maybe this brings me to one question that we have discussed in our latest event where we have met in Amsterdam, because the operating partners are there to create value, and they are very, very much also challenged on that, of course, because you're not there to do any hours, because in startups no one is there to do any hours, but really to create the value that you were just talking about. And so we were discussing the question of the value creation gap that we have in Europe. And I think it would be interesting to have your perspective here on the record, because we had it in Amsterdam on the stage, but now on the record. And how to maximize this value creation by European startup scale-ups.
I think the value creation gap is quite an important element, because the standard model when you do investment with startups is really two directions. So it's the founder and it's the venture capital. What I think is very important to take into account is to bring actually another element into that two direction. And it's by bringing the client, the final end user into the situation. So you really build the capital, you really build the end user, and the capacity to execute. And that's where operating partners can bring into that area, that ability to test and challenge the end user. As an end user, what are the solutions of the companies are proposing? Because most of the time you will have great products or great services, and you spend a lot of time trying to fix it and making it ready for the market. But then how do you sell it? You have to be able to have that end user view into the equation. And for me, the best example I have is in cybersecurity, looking at what Clear Sky, a pioneer in cybersecurity investment capital, has done. They have really built that CISO board of directors within their capabilities. So for the companies that are acquired, it's really interesting because they have access to former CISO as founder of Clear Sky, but also as part of their board members. And therefore, their whole thinking is about what and when to contact which CISO, and not to do a lot of emails that goes blind, but really understands for their solution when will it actually be implementable for a CISO. And that means also that suddenly the private, so the venture capital is much more where it's of course providing capital, but it's providing that platform for discussing what makes a CISO awake at night. And most importantly, to filter it down. So the private equity operating partners will be able actually to make the connection, again, back to my example with the EdTech, at the moment when it is mature. And therefore, because the venture capital have this, this board of CISO, then you know exactly what's coming up, what are the difficulties of implementation, and when exactly should the introduction be made. And that's really a kind of one-to-one marketing and selling expertise that can be only filtered by operating partner or former CISO. And I think for the CISO also, it's really important to understand what are the next technology coming up, what are the trusted partners that can be built around their references in terms of partners. And I think it's that element that for me is filling the value creation gap. And therefore, rather than two directions, then you have that's fantastic, virtual cycle and circle that helps companies just go to the next level.
Thank you very much, Sylvie, for demystifying the operating partner's role. And I think it's going to be helpful for many people who ask themselves the question, do I need an operating partner and what can he do for me, he or she? And also, is there a future for me as an operating partner, maybe with the experience that I have? I enjoy very much working with the portfolio companies and discussing the problems that they have, even on a very, just to see what they need and to find in my network the people who could help, or even in my own experience, what can help. And each time we discuss with the founder of a startup, we go out with a list of 5 or 6 points. I say, okay, yeah, basically this is what I need and this is my question. And there's also a question of trust between the company and the operating partner, because I'm not, as a consultant, trying to sell them something, but I'm trying to understand the problem and find the right solution with a very operational point of view that the investor would, depending on the investor, of course, but would have a little bit less. So I think maybe a call to the operating partners to think about it and maybe contact us if they are interested, but to know exactly also what the challenges are, because building up the business as an operating partner is not something that goes very easy and that takes a lot of time. But then also for the entrepreneurs to really use this offer that is on the market, if it is part of the fund that has invested in them, and to actively use it. I think that's a good conclusion to close the value creation gap. Okay, well, thank you very much. We also wanted to talk about the funding gap, but I think we need to take this into another episode, but because if not, it would be too much for today, and it's a whole another topic that we can cover another time. So thank you very much for your time, Sylvie.
Yeah, it was a pleasure actually discussing with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of European Tech Talks until the end. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating and share it with your friends and colleagues. This will help increase our visibility on the podcast platforms. And don't forget to subscribe to receive our latest episodes. Before you go, have you considered joining the European Champions Alliance? As a member, you will have access to a network of European companies and industry experts, exclusive publications on industry-specific topics, invitations to members-only events, and support and advice on your pan-European expansion plans. If you're interested, please visit our website at european-champions.org or reach out to us on LinkedIn. See you in the next episode.